Hey everybody, it's your friendly neighborhood Jerry Rasco here with you again today. We are looking at The Amazing Spider-Man. This time we're looking at Amazing Spider-Man issue number 32. It is a pretty cool issue. It is a continuation of some stories that we've seen over the last two issues. Everything is coming to a head very soon in some pretty classic and famous Spider-Man action. So no spoilers yet, but this is a pretty good issue for sure, and something that I want to share with all of you, and let's review it together. So we're going to head over to the comic here in just a minute and take a look. Before we do that, of course, let me thank everybody who has subscribed to the channel and follows this video series. I really appreciate all of your input, your follows, your likes, and your subscriptions to the channel. If this is the first one that you found and you're jumping in here in issue 32, you might want to look back at the playlist that's here on the channel. It goes all the way back to Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man, where we deep dive into all of the art all the way up to here where we're talking about issue number 32. So let's get over to the comic and let's dive right in. Okay, so here we have the cover for The Amazing Spider-Man number 32. And I said, wow, this is a pretty wild cover. That was the first note that I wrote today was wild. So here we have Spider-Man just going berserk, destroying a building. Looks like he's flipped over a car. People are fleeing. And what I liked about this was it's very ambiguous as to what's happening. So we as readers, we assume, of course, always that Spidey is our hero and that he's good. But as we've seen in the comic itself, you have people like J. Jonah Jameson or the ever fickle citizens of New York sometimes thinking that Spidey is a bad guy. And maybe that's what's happened. Is Spidey been pushed to the limits with, as you can see there on the cover, a sick Aunt May? And has he just lost it? Has he turned to the dark side? We don't know who these people are that he is kind of attacking. Are they just regular pedestrians in suits? Are they bad guys? It's not clear. So that's what makes it an interesting cover, right? It makes you want to pick it up and begin to look through the issue. And as I mentioned, there is a shot there, insert of Aunt May. She is sick, and the copy here indicates that Spidey is fighting for her. So we kind of feel like these guys are probably bad guys in some way, but again, it's kind of ambiguous. The other thing I liked about this cover is the color. So you have a pretty neutral. Now, if you're a fan of the channel and you've been following along, you know that these covers are usually a lot darker than what they would have been in the original printing. And that has to do with the way that they were scanned and the age. So let me just take a step back and inform anybody who's new, or remind anybody who's come back, that these are PDF scanned copies of the comic that we're looking at here. So what that means is somebody at Marvel in 2004 got a hold of a copy of this comic, put it on a flatbed scanner, and scanned every page exactly how it is. So that means that either they scanned it and maybe they made adjustments to like the contrast or the brightness, maybe to alleviate any glare from the shiny cover stock. But for whatever reason, these scan covers are very, very dark. Again, could be age as well. So it's hard to say exactly the color in the background, but my point here is Spidey really pops off the page. You have a lot of neutral and gray colors around him. You have this lighter background color, and then even this green car helps push forward the primary colors of that red and blue Spider-Man and make him the focus of what's going on even through the action. So nice color choices, a cover that the action makes you go, what's happening? And makes you want to pick it up and turn the page. So again, hits all the notes that you want on a cover. So Great cover. So as I mentioned, these are scanned copies of the original comic. So you can see there on the left, you have the inside advertisements. You can see the yellowing of the paper and if there's any folds or tears or things like that. So we really are looking at something from the time, which is pretty cool. So what we've got here is we've got our splash page. And now, so on one hand, I love it because the splash page is the first page of the story. And if you are a follower of this series, you know that sometimes I lament the fact that we go ahead and open that cover and it's just sort of a recreation of another moment from the comic, essentially a second cover inside. And my argument is always, why aren't we putting the story in the first page and getting right into it when every page is valuable, right? These aren't 40-page, 48-page, 72-page comics. You know, these are like 22 to 26-page comics. And so, you know, you don't have a ton of space in there to tell your story every issue. But here we did it. That jumps right into the story. However, it's not the most exciting use of a splash page, but that's okay. We can... So it's got its pluses, got its minuses. Here we're seeing the underwater base of this new villain that is referred to as the Master Planner. And this, again, tracks back directly into what happened in the previous issue, in issue 31, and a little bit into issue 30, because the guys, the thugs, the cronies who are working for the Master Planner were sort of introduced in issue 30. So here we go. So the Master Planner has been stealing a lot of radioactive either equipment or materials. And Spider-Man, of course, has thwarted the Master Planner's plans a couple times. And so that person is getting really frustrated. But as of right now, we don't know who the Master Planner is until we turn the page and find a very familiar figure of Dr. Octopus. And Dr. Octopus is, of course, the Master Planner. So I think that's neat, and I liked the design of Dr. Octopus here a lot. We'll see more where it's more clear, but you can see he's in his more traditional sort of green jumpsuit that ends up being sort of the costume that tags with him for a long time. But his overall look is a little bit cooler than he has been. So you can see he's got these kind of techie goggles on as opposed to just the dark glasses that he started out with. And his hair almost sort of looks slicked back. I suppose it could be like a little fringe of a cut, but it's definitely not the sort of bowl cut that we've seen before or that we'll see in the future. So this is visually, I think, Steve Ditko's attempt to make Dr. Octopus a more credible or visually credible villain. You know, when you see someone that, you know, the joke about Dr. Octopus is he's just a big nerd with these mechanical arms, right? He's kind of chubby. He's got a bowl haircut. He wears glasses. Like, he couldn't be more stereotypical, you know, kind of nerdy. So that always takes away, I think, some of his credibility as a villain. Where here, I mean, we're looking at this point in time in Spider-Man, Dr. Octopus is arguably his arch enemy, his number one toughest villain that he faces. So we've got Doc Ock looking a little bit cooler, which is nice. We're also going to go through here and see there's, as you can tell, just by scanning across the page, there are a lot of panels to start off with here. And that is because we are going to get through a lot of dialogue and narration and plot devices to move us into what is going to be some big action later. So you got to get through some of this stuff, and this is things about the love triangle between Peter and Betty and Ned. So Betty has been a long time on again, off again girlfriend for Peter, but she's been spending time with this guy Ned Leeds, who's proposed, and Peter is kind of at this point where he understands Betty doesn't like Spider-Man because of what happened in the past, And so this is his opportunity to sort of deliberately act like a jerk, and in order to put a wedge between himself and Betty and kind of push Betty towards Ned, which is fine. He also is talking about, working on his whole stuff with Aunt May and how she's sick and she's in the hospital and he needs money. So that's why he's at the Bugle to begin with. So pacing, we're moving through this really fast by doing a lot of little itty bitty shots with a lot of dialogue in there to get through them until we can get to the big moments. So we've got that's all wrapped up. He goes to the hospital and we find out what's wrong with Aunt May. And then she's has a problem because there's radioactivity, some sort of radioactive material in her blood. And of course, Peter blames himself because back a number of issues ago, and here they don't even reference it. So I'll talk about this in a second, but Peter had to donate blood to Aunt May in an early issue. And at the time, everything seemed fine. But here, they've picked up that little plot thread that seemed to be done and over, everything was cool, and kind of tugged that back in and said, okay, wait, what if it isn't? So again, visually, from a page composition standpoint, we're talking about tons of panels to get through all this dialogue, all this work. I liked here where, obviously, we have this is more of a laboratory, but we're in a hospital. Typically, it's going to be very well lit. It's going to be, bright fluorescence and stuff. But we've added in some shadowing and stuff for the drama. So Peter standing next to this equipment as he hears about the issue and believes that he's the cause of it. So his face is somewhat shadowed. And then down here we see that kind of diagonal shading of like a window shade, like the bands across a window shade. That, so again, sort of film noir type of look where the drama is really amping up, and so we're going to bring in that dramatic lighting for the scene. So very, very good stuff there from a visual standpoint. Now, I was going to mention this. I don't know. I didn't go back to look if this is the first time that a no prize has been mentioned in the comics. So if you're a longtime fan of Marvel, you may remember, as I do, things that were called no prizes. And what it meant was if you were a reader and you found an error in a comic, you could write a letter, like a handwritten letter, and mail it in, and you could tell them, what you found and how, what your explanation was and why it wasn't really a mistake. And if you were the first person, they would send you a no prize. And a no prize is exactly that. It's no prize. I think you might just have gotten like a letter that said, hey, congratulations, here's your no prize. And it was nothing. But it sort of became a thing of, could fans pick things out? Could they come up with solutions or answers to, why something had changed when it really was, kind of an editing error. But if you put some logic behind it, now all of a sudden you're doing their job for them. So pretty funny. So here, Stan, we know that it happened in an issue. They don't remember what issue it was. And I don't know if maybe they just didn't want to look. And so they just put in this thing about the first person to tell them would get a no prize. So anyway, no prizes are an old thing that I don't think they do anymore or even mention anymore. But I remember reading through my old comics and as a kid and being like, oh, you get a Marvel no prize. That's cool. Not even putting together a no prize means you get no prize. So here we see a lot of emotion. Peter's very upset, of course, because he believes that this is, again, his fault. And now, going back to Uncle Ben being, feeling like that was his fault. And now Aunt May, and he can't do it. And he rages out in this huge panel of smashing this table in a way that we have not seen Peter really react much before. There's been a little bit of it, but his anger and rage in these scenes here are great, and goes to show that somebody who has the sort of the abilities of a superhero like a Spider-Man, if it was real and they ever let go by accident or in a fit of rage, man, I mean, slamming a door turns into ripping it off the hinges, or slamming your hand on a table, you put your hand through the table. So really great stuff to emphasize Peter's mental state of panic, guilt, rage. All of that comes across very clearly here in these panels. So now he's gonna figure things out. So of course Spidey is like, the doctors can't figure things out, I'm gonna go to somebody who's even smarter, and then that is his friend Dr. Kirk Connors, who was the Lizard. So if you remember those episodes, you can go back and take a look at those issues. We have episodes here on that where Kirk Connors turns himself into the Lizard, and Spidey of course helps him. So Kirk Connors is always sort of at Spider-Man's willing to help. He's not at his beck and call, but he is there and ready to help him at a moment's notice. And so that's what they're doing. So they look at the blood and figure out that with the right materials, they can create a serum that could stop what's happening to Aunt May. So I like this here. I mentioned this page of the Spidey in the lab are really great shots. And you've got the camera moving around, which is really nice. So you have sort of, when I say camera, essentially our eyes are the camera. At what angle are we viewing this picture? So you can't move the reader around, but you can move the image around to sort of recreate that idea of moving a camera through space and taking that picture. And that's what the best storytellers do, whether that's in film, in television, or even in something illustrated like comics. So here you have what's called a mid-shot. We see the full figure of Spidey, but we are not pulled out like these. This shot here is more of a longer shot where we're pulled out and we can sort of see him through the window. Let me see if I can find another long, like this would be a longer shot where we are farther away from Peter and we can see the whole figure and the area behind him. Then we come into more of a mid shot where we don't see the full figure. You're not seeing all the background. We pull in a little tighter even to see the details of what he's working on with all of these glass jars and flame and beakers and stuff, because of course Spidey is extremely knowledgeable about science in his own right. So the two of them are working together. Great hands. Talked about this a lot in past episodes with Spidey. The way Steve Ditko draws hands is great, right? So he's doing delicate work and just kind of holding him with his different fingertips and stuff and working on things. And having your hands, it's a difficult thing to do, to draw hands. There's a lot of moving parts there. But to do it in an interesting, creative way, again, he's holding and pouring something in. So, this little finger is out of the way, right, as he's pouring. Same thing here. He's turning a dial, and so his pinky is sticking out. It brings life to your characters. So hand studies are definitely something that artists should take a look at. If you're looking at trying to get into comics. So they need a radioactive isotope to add to this formula to counteract what's in Aunt May's blood. And they've ordered it, but of course, on its way from I think it was out, they just said West Coast. Doc Ock's goons grab it because it's radioactive material that he can use for his big plan. So, of course, these guys find out that it was stolen, and so Spidey is on the move to get that serum back. Again, a lot of pacing, a lot of dialogue to get through so that everybody's on board with what the story is and what the motivation is. So at this point, we are... So this would be page 9. This is page 10. So we're about halfway through. So we're about really ready to kick it up a notch, which we're going to see here shortly. So again, still the panel grids, 6-panel grids, because Spidey is moving quickly. He doesn't have time to waste. And that's what we're going to see. So there's tons of action of Spidey here. So great swinging poses of him moving across the city. He goes after Frederick Foswell. Again, for fans of the channel and of the comic, Foswell is a reporter for the Daily Bugle that used to be a criminal and now kind of has some ties to the underworld that he uses under disguise to get his news stories. So he snags Foswell and tells him, like, hey, I know who you are. I know you've gone, you've changed, you turned things around, but I need your help. I need to know about the master planner and how I'm going to find him. And I need you to get on this. And so then he goes into some other places. Spidey's got some other crooks that he's dealt with before. So he goes and leans on them some. And again, you see when so many issues, Spidey is dealing with regular criminals and stuff. And, maybe he's flipping around and he's punching guys and stuff like that. But to see him just like run through a door at, just smashing buildings around, crates, whatever, and not even pausing, just moving through is, it just really shows the power that he has that he doesn't use all the time, which is a big inherent trait of Spidey. Again, great lighting here. This is terrific stuff. As we cut back to the hospital and Aunt May, she's not doing well. Things aren't good. She's, they're kind of wrapping their hands up, but this is a really nice where you have these close-up elements of the bed frame and this IV here framing the doctor. And then again, those diagonal light through the window, right, tells you it's that film noir style of telling you how serious and how dramatic the moment is. And now here's Spidey going after some more guys. And this is where we get the cover image. So, he literally just throws a car. These guys are going to try to escape in a car. He just throws it, which again is an element or it's an example of Spidey's superhuman strength that we don't always get to see. He doesn't get to sort of cut loose that much. Here he just rips these metal, staircase down. He's just destroying this warehouse, and that's where you get that cover image. Very nice here of him, again, sort of questioning the bad guys and kind of getting a lead. He finds a secret area. Terrific shot of him leaping down onto where all these bad guys are. He's going to take them out. That's a really nice pose there as well. And again, moving the camera around. A long shot, more of a medium-ish shot to a close-up, back to a long shot, back to a down shot over behind Spidey. Again, so great use of moving that camera around to make the angles different and the visual storytelling more exciting for the viewer. We're moving with that camera. And here's the action, and we get into it. And I have mentioned this before, Steve Ditko's fight continuity. So what that means is, from panel to panel, can you track how Spidey's moving, and does it make sense based on what the last position that he was in was? So he dives in. Now, this is the only one that I found a little odd. He should have been facing the other way. Right? So he's going from this way to, now he's going to that way. So that's something you don't want to do. That's referred to as the 180 line. I may have mentioned this earlier in an early episode. So I learned about this in college when I took a class on making film, and what they talked about was the 180 line. So if you imagine from you are the camera, you are the viewer. So straight from you, straight onto infinity, there's an imaginary line that goes like this. And anything can look at the camera, can be on that line. And it can be to the left of the line. It can be to the right of the line. It doesn't matter, as long as as that thing doesn't cross that line without us seeing the progression. because when you flip the camera, so if I flipped from this view to now I'm looking the other way. So imagine if now instead of me looking at the camera, I'm the camera looking this way, everything would be different. My view is mirror flipped, and that can be confusing for someone who's watching. The best example, if anybody out there is a sports fan, when you watch a professional or call it football game, American football game, they move, the camera is kind of always in one position. And they move from this side in one direction, and then the other team gets the ball and they move in the other direction. The reason you do that and you don't flip the camera over, because then it looks like everybody's going in the same direction. So that's why that camera is there in one spot. You can change it, and when they do, at least it's not as much as they used to, but I remember back in the day they would have a little graphic down at the bottom that would say reverse angle, so that you would know as a viewer, wait a minute, the guy didn't turn around and start running in the wrong direction. It's the camera moved. So anyway, the point here is if you're moving from left to right, he probably wants to stay moving left to right for the most part. And this one where he kind of got turned around. But I really like this sequence here from, again, Spidey fighting in a way that is unbelievable, and something only he could do. Leaning back on one foot, kicking, throwing, and punching at the same time, and then coming back through, punching with both hands, flipping out of the crowd, and then running along the wall and punching. Terrific, great fight choreography, and something that's actually a lot harder than you may think if you haven't tried to do it. You have to put into play where all the figures are. What are they doing? If he punches one, is it, where is that guy flying off to? And if he punches from left to right, that character is going to move to the right. So you have to plan all that stuff and think it through, and Steve Ditko is a master at it. So now he is, again, tracking down and deeper into the base here so that he can get to this radioactive serum that he needs. And Spidey is now in the underwater base and looking for it, and he finds it, so he knows it's a trap. But here he gets hit with electricity, and I really liked this as a visual representation. He could have been colored as normal, red and blue, with the white zap around him, but I like the fact that the electricity is so strong and so sudden that it's almost like a photo flash, and so all we can see, we're blinded, and all we can see is black and white. So I thought that was a really nice little touch there, and pretty cool stuff. And then, of course, we have a 3/4 splash revealing, to Spidey at least, Dr. Octopus. And I love it. The only thing I wish is that could we have kept the reveal to here? So in these scenes where we saw Dr. Octopus earlier, could we have done more with shadows? Could we have done it in such a way that it wasn't revealed it was Doc Ock until here? That would have been really cool. That would have been a great reveal. On the other hand, you probably would have wanted to do that on what's called a page turn. So, like, as we go back, so when you turn, you don't know what's going to happen. When you turn that first page and see Dr. Octopus, that's your reveal. And if you're going to reveal things or have a shocking moment or a surprising moment, typically you want to try to plan it on your page turn so that it's not sitting here and I can see it before I read it as I'm reading this other page. But I love the 3/4 splash. I love the classic Doc Ock's, grabbed all 4 of Spidey's limbs and he's kind of at his mercy. And so now what are we going to do? So Spidey, of course, as we've seen, he's sort of led up through this whole issue, is on a tear. This guy is on a rampage, and he is using the full force of his power and trying to, to save Aunt May. And this is something, I mean, I don't know that we've seen before, where he's so strong, he just flips and pulls Doc Ock right off his feet and starts swinging him around the lab, and smashing into stuff. Again, great large imagery, large pictures. Now, we see that where he zooms in here more as Spidey is prying the Doc Ock's arms off of him and trying to tie them up into knots to kind of hobble him. But I like this. So you can see he's grabbed his... Doc Ock has grabbed Spidey's left ankle. And so when you track back, here's the ankle. He's still grabbed it, and he's using this foot to try to push and free the ankle, which I thought was a pretty cool little touch there. Neat move where he's tying these arms in knots while he's prying them off of himself. The reason that this one is such a long shot, the destruction here is going to come into play. So this is not just an idea of like, let's do smaller figures, or let's show some of the lab equipment, or we need a background to establish where they are. We've already done that. But this damage is part of that storyline that we're going to see moving forward. So that's a nice little use of a technique to show stuff in the background that's going to come into play later. Because it would be very easy to just zoom in on these fights and the punches and that kind of stuff. But again, pulling back to see stuff so that we're setting up these threads for later. Very important. Oops. And so now, like I said, Spidey is literally tearing things apart. He's ripping up equipment and throwing it at him. He's pulling up the metal flooring and shaking it like a rug to knock Dr. Octopus off his feet. He's smashing the arms into more support beams. Now he's picking up this giant piece, I'm assuming it's like concrete, and throwing it at Dr. Octopus, who's hiding behind a beam. The beam smashes, and now all the stuff that was up above is falling to the floor. And that's why this becomes so important, that we see the destruction. This isn't just Spidey beating up the bad guy. He's literally destroying the lab, but this is going to come back to haunt him. And this is, again, another theme of Spider-Man that we've seen over the years, right? So, and maybe this explains why he doesn't lash out, because his actions, when he doesn't think about things, have repercussions. So the actions that he didn't think about it. When he let the crook go, and that crook ended up killing his uncle. And then when Aunt May needed blood, he was like, he let himself get, coerced into doing it, and everything seemed okay, but now there's repercussions, right? Being Spider-Man and the things that happened with Betty Brant and her brother who got killed when she blamed Spider-Man. So how he got involved in that without thinking about what the repercussions were. Now that has eventually eroded his relationship with Betty. So this is what's happening. And again, here's another example. So now he is lashing out. He is trying to do the right thing, but he's not thinking it through. And now he's smashed, and he's trapping himself in all this equipment where he's may or may not be able to save Aunt May. So again, great large panels of action. I love it. We see him diving away as this equipment's falling all around him with the shadows. Really great stuff. Terrific here as well to show him he's underneath. He's sort of pinned. Seems like he could be able to get out, except this giant piece of equipment with these big spikes are falling right at him. So terrific use of space, big large panels to emphasize how big the equipment is and how much trouble he's going to be in. Tries to use the webbing, but this thing is way too big. It crashes down, and you can see it actually goes through the floor. So he is like pinned to the ground underneath this piece of equipment that has literally been driven into the flooring. He can see the vial. This is what he needs to save Aunt May. And now The other thing, he's done so much damage, now there's a leak and they're underwater, and the East River in New York is going to come pouring through if he can't get out of here in time. And again, all because Spidey didn't think things through. So he tries to lift the big equipment off of himself, and it can't. So here's a guy, like we said, who flipped a car like it was nothing. He has been on this rampage, tearing through buildings and people and ripping stuff apart. The fight with Doc Ock, I mean, he's never been more aggressive. And yet this thing is so heavy, he can't lift this. So what's going to happen? Everything, there's a ticking clock between how long can Aunt May last? How long can this serum that Dr. Connors is working on, how long is it going to be viable? If Spidey gets out, he's got a whole bunch of goons waiting for him, and the river is starting to flood in. What is going to happen? And that's the end of the issue. And it leaves us on this cliffhanger. I will tell you, semi-spoilers. I mean, these are 60-year-old comics, so how much of a spoiler can it be? But the next issue is going to have one of top 5 most iconic, if not the most iconic, Spider-Man moment of all time. And what's going to happen here? And so this is a great cliffhanger ending. I love the idea that this story has been continuing through several issues now and is going to keep going. I think that's a great idea. When you do that, it continues to bring readers back every month. It's not a question of, do I want to get Spidey next month? I have to get Spidey next month. So just look through here. Here's the rest of the issue. Let's cut back over to the desk and we'll wrap things up. So, wow, yeah, there's Amazing Spider-Man number 32. And man, a lot of action, a lot of really cool stuff. Artistically, we've seen the big panels with all that action, which is terrific. Great use of camera movement through the story. Lots of dramatic lighting to make people understand where the more somber moments are. Terrific hands. You know, again, hands are hard to draw, but can be very dynamic and can really be expressive for a character like Spider-Man when you can't see his face. We've seen a cooler, updated sort of Dr. Octopus. And so, yeah, very, very neat stuff. Great issue. Obviously a classic. As far as a rating goes, I'm probably going to give this one, I give this one like an 8.5 out of 10. Terrific stuff. Moves the story along in a lot of ways, in a lot of key elements, without sacrificing the action. And again, tying back into that whole mantra of Spider-Man about power, responsibility, and accountability. And so we're going to see how that all plays out next week with The Amazing Spider-Man. So, as always, thank you all for checking out the video today. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget to subscribe, like the video if you get a chance. Feel free to leave comments. I do try to look through every single comment that I get and really appreciate those. So if you have something to share, drop a comment. And again, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notifications so that you are aware when next week's video comes out. They're every Monday at 8 a.m. Make sure you don't miss a single one. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next week with more Spider-Man.